So for our next session, President Caldwell is going to be joining us in a moment. Just going to do a short introduction for him. Christopher Caldwell, President of College of Menominee Nation, is an enrolled member of the Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin. He has led the college since February of 2020, serving first as interim president and officially installed by the board of directors in June of 2021. Caldwell is the fourth person to lead the College of Menominee Nation. He has been in a range of positions at the college, including student, director, adjunct, and president. An alumnus of the college, Caldwell began his higher education at College of Menominee Nation, earning his associate's degree in sustainable development. He holds a bachelor's degree in natural resources from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a master's degree in environmental science and policy from the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, and is currently a PhD candidate in environment and resources from the University of Wisconsin-Madison Nelson Institute. During his career, Caldwell has served in previous positions focused on sustainability, specifically within the forestry sector. Tribal Resources Director of Compliance Enforcement, Officer for the Menominee Indian Tribe, Forest Products Technician with USDA Forest Services, Forest Products Laboratory in Madison, Student Intern with U.S. Department of Interior Bureau of Indian Affairs, and CCE, Timber Market and Forestry Technician with the Menominee Tribal Enterprises, and more recently as the Director of the Sustainable Development Institute at College of Menominee Nation. So please help me welcome President Caldwell to discuss respecting the
immense fear of public speaking. Go figure, that's all I do with my job is talking to groups these days. Thank you for the introduction, Ken. Thank you for the invitation to share some of our story here for the Menominee people. One of the things that I wanted to start out with is just when the idea that I would be sharing what Indigenous knowledge is was pretty immense, and I think a task that even a growing body of Indigenous scholars is still wrestling with. So as I thought about it, I thought because we're focused on climate change, I would just go back to some of the previous work I had done as the director of the Sustainable Development Institute. Better? For the folks in the back. Okay, thank you. So I figured I would focus a little more on my work at the Sustainable Development Institute, and along the way tell a little bit more of myself. And I think that's where, when we talk about knowledge, at least from each of our individual perspectives, we can be a little more authoritative in how we approach knowledge, and in how we apply it in our personal lives, but also in the work that we do, whatever we might be doing. So one of the ways I thought about framing this really kind of came from some recent experiences. For me, it's been a long So it's going to force me to try to speak louder. So for me, it had been a long time coming where one of the things that I had thought about growing up was what my real name was. And when we say real name, it's not the English name like Chris Caldwell, but what's our Indian name? And for me, it's what would my Menominee name be? And And there were times where, growing up, I would think about it, but I didn't know how to go about doing it. There was this mix of growing up in understanding Menominee ways of life, but also growing up in the Catholic Church, attending a Catholic school. Even though at the time we were taught by nuns, we'd go to church as part of school, we also at that time had this growing change too, where Menominee elders were brought into the classroom to help teach us some of the language. So growing up, it was, I feel like I would describe it as growing at the at that nexus point of colonization, assimilation, but also reclaiming our identities. And so looking at how to go about getting an A in the right way was always something that weighed on me. Even as I went through, growing up, starting a profession, starting a family, and all of that. And
We're here to be human, right?
that's a little better. I'll still try to speak up louder for the people in the back, but so that really weighed on me, and eventually, though, in the last about a couple of months ago, I was able to connect with my aunt and talk through how do we go about doing that. And me and my daughter were looking to get our names. We brought her tobacco and asked her and talked with her, and she was eventually came back to us and told us this is what she was ready, and this is what we should do. And so, Chris Caldwell and the Louise one, but Matt Hugh Onaput is my real name that was given to me. And the significance of it is a couple of points. One is my aunt looked into the history and talked to different people, and she said, this is your grandfather's name. So it's a name that's been carried forward. It carries significance with our family. And the other part is that going through that, that action, that activity, it really made me think about indigenous knowledge, maybe not as this, the way that maybe Western-based knowledge systems or academia might elevate things, but more in terms of how we as indigenous peoples look at our knowledges and our knowledge systems in terms of continuing through generations, the connections of understanding and understanding through language. So I tell that story because I was thinking about that this morning as we were doing what we, at the College of Menominee Nation, we've started a practice of morning prayer on Mondays. And so one of our tribal leaders, he jumps on Zoom, and whoever's available, they jump on. And so Joey Owanepe, the Kachka, he shares a little story depending on the season. And then he'll lead in a prayer for the week and just kind of get us reframed and thinking together collectively for the work that we're going to do. But this morning he was sharing a story about knowledge and the fact that sometimes we're just not ready to see or hear that knowledge that we're looking for. We might be thinking, okay, I need to learn this now, but the maturity that we're at or the understanding that we're at level or age, we're just not ready to hear it or see it. And he talked about that in terms of wild rice and sharing stories at the time of season. And he said he was talking about they were meeting with people, trying to better understand when to share stories. They were looking through books. He said we went through this book maybe 20 times or so, And it wasn't until recently where they found what they were looking for, and it just, at that time, just popped out. And so, you know, I think that is an important part of, if we think about language, maybe not trying to define it or anything, but just thinking about language in that respect, our knowledge in that respect, it will come to us at a time when we're ready. And so that's kind of the theme that I wanted to focus on with the presentation here. And the other part of that is, as I think about knowledge is recognition, education, respectfulness, transformation, relation, and responsibility. So all of those things, as I was thinking about it, are part of knowledge and knowledge systems. You can see from the map here then, the one part that I really have focused on over time is thinking about knowledge and its connecting power of humans in the environment. So when we think about that relational aspect of knowledge and the people that have been upon the land, you think of all the different indigenous peoples throughout this part of the region, the Great Lakes region. And then in particular, one of the things I came across in David Beck's book, Siege and Survival, he talks about that concept of Pekan Nakihi, or sit down upon. And that was really a relational way that the Menominee, if the neighboring tribes needed access to the resources, if things were, if it was getting tough times and people were looking for resources for subsistence, they could approach the Menominee for permission to come and sit down upon or utilize the resources of the land. And vice versa, in that understanding that if the Menominee were struggling, they would look at similar customary practices of going out and requesting permission. So thinking about those stories and this concept of sitting down upon the land, I just thought it really emphasized some of the work that I've done with SDI, a lot of the things that I've learned over time being in that position, kind of trying to figure out how I reached is there a slide changer?
Oh, here, I'll do it.
So, and I really like this map because it gives you a good sense of that different communities, the different nations and peoples that connected with the land. And a lot of my understanding and development since I started working for Menominee Tribal Enterprises, the sustainable forestry organization of the tribe, was through this theoretical model of sustainability. I don't know how many people have accessed this before. Anybody familiar with it? Okay. So this is a theoretical representation of the Menominee story of sustainable forestry. It was developed at a time by our tribal leaders to think about the Menominee experience as an example of sustainable development. Back in the early 90s, the United Nations had been meeting and talking about sustainable development, looking for practical examples. And so at that time, our tribal leaders came together, leaders at the College of Menominee Nation, Menominee Tribal Enterprises, tribal government officials, and cultural leaders to talk about it. You often see the three-legged stools of sustainability, the ecology, economy, and social or the human aspect. But when our leaders met, they felt that didn't really exemplify the Menominee way of understanding what was being described as sustainability, or that continuation. So they came up with this model that represents different dimensions of that community life, of sustaining community life. Some of the more specific examples from the Menominee approach are land and sovereignty and human perception, activity, and behavior that connects to these other areas, economics, technology, institutions, and natural environment, where natural environment still recognizes humans are part of that rather than separate. And then the other parts of this model that I say operationalize it is this understanding that at the center is this concept of autochthony, or of the land, representing the Menominee's long connection with the land. Over 10,000 years, our creation story takes place about 60 miles to the east of where we are today. So all of those understandings are captured with that concept. And then the important part is that the process of understanding and balancing tensions identified between these dimensions, that work of trying to balance them is sustainable development. There isn't an end goal that we're working towards. We understand that if we make a decision or a change within or across any of these dimensions, that changes the context, but it pushes the understanding further down the road. So in that essence, it becomes an intergenerational. An intergenerational and iterative process. So it's an ongoing process of looking to balance the tensions that we might find. And the model, I think I skipped over that, but one of the other parts of operationalizing it is that wherever we see an environmental impact to our human-environment relations that spans two or more of these dimensions, that's where we want to focus our work. We want to develop resources. We want to convene dialogue with our community and others to better understand that. And I say that because one of the things that when we start talking climate change, it impacts across all of those dimensions. So climate change over the years for SDI has become a large focus of the work, but not simply just saying climate change, but how does that impact different areas of community life along the way. So when we think about climate change, probably the most one of the bigger impacts to Menominee prior to climate change was colonization, assimilation, the treaty era. So during the European and American settler expansion period, that really impacted how the Menominee lived. So if you look on the left, that's a breakup of the approximate 10 million acres of ancestral lands that the Menominee occupied prior to contact with Europeans, colonists, and then American settlers. And prior to that, the Menominee had lived in a seasonal way where you would look to go to the next area, whether it was wild rice camps, hunting, fishing, gathering food, gathering medicine. There were different areas around this way that the Menominee bands would move based on the seasonal realm. But you can see here that as in the short 50 years or so of treaties, the 10 million acre land base shrunk to less than 250,000 acres at that time. And so with that, the Menominee had to really adapt to how do we maintain our human environmental connections with the landscape, those knowledge systems that were developed over those thousands of years, over those millions of acres, suddenly became shrunk down to a smaller land base. You can see where up in the state of Wisconsin map, that yellow outline is the Menominee Reservation present day. point that out because one of the things when you think about the change, how the knowledge and how we connected with the land had to change, it didn't mean that the values changed. It didn't mean that we didn't prioritize that relationship with the land or that thinking about how do we maintain what we have for future generations. And I say that it's really, summing up thousands, hundreds of years of history to go from that to this map in the lower right-hand corner. For those of you familiar with the Menominee forestry story, you know that at the time when Menominee were relegated to this reservation lands, we talked about how might we get into the timber business, cutting trees from the forest, which was a pretty alien concept at the time for Menominee people accustomed to just operating within the forest and not going through and cutting large swaths of trees out. Chief Oshkosh at that time expressed the values of the Menominee when he said, start cutting from the rising sun to the setting sun, taking only the mature trees, the sick trees, the dead and the down. And when you reach the end, turn and start over again, and that way the trees will last forever. So what he was visualizing there through his words were both an expression of Menominee value and knowledge systems of that relationship, but also a way to continue to make a living from the forest in a way that incorporated modern or more modern ways of harvesting and managing the forest. And that's represented here in terms of this map, which shows the forest cover types. So it breaks up the reservation in terms of the types of trees that grow across the forest. You can see from this end is more the northern hardwood types, transitions to northern hardwood, pine cover types down to a drier area where it's red pine, scrubble, lower shrubland type settings in that area. But it's broken up like that because now the Menominee manage to use silvicultural treatments. They use different logging equipment, GPS, GIS to implement that vision that Chief Oshkosh shared. So if you think about that in terms of that sharing of Menominee knowledge systems of how to take care of their forest, but then incorporating tools that could help them implement that vision, there's that sharing of cross-knowledge systems. It's not that Menominee said our knowledge is the only way. This is our knowledge system that we want to see impacting our forest, but we'll look at the knowledge and the tools and the resources that you have to carry that vision forward. So this slide usually just demonstrates that transitioning there. And so at the College of Menominee Nation, which we've been celebrating 30 years as an institution, as a creation of the Menominee people, we try to exemplify that and support that through education, research, community and outreach projects across the campus. So up in the upper left, we're there at the casino, and you probably rode by the campus before, but this is the aerial shot of the CMN Kashina campus. This is the Sustainable Development Institute here. This yellow line is our trail system that acts as both an outdoor learning area, but also a connector to our research plots in the back of campus, where we do climate change monitoring connected to our other plots in the sustained yield forest. But it just shows that as a tribal college, as a creation of the Menominee people, our job is to extend that knowledge system in a contemporary way of approaching it, not losing that Menominee knowledge system or the values, but exemplifying and carrying it forward. So a couple of areas of focus have been climate change, forest research, indigenous planning, sustainable agriculture, and campus community sustainability. Next one. From that work, we've also built outwards in terms of how we engage with other tribes, other non-tribal agencies, and looking at how do we as tribal people influence the planning for our future, rather than taking in climate change plans that tell us how to work in our tribal community. One of the projects that I really enjoyed was working with the Great Lakes, Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, 1854 Minnesota Treaty Authority, and other tribal groups and federal agencies to develop a tribal climate adaptation plan. The other part I liked was working on my Ojibwe, so let's see if I remember. So caring for those who care for us. So it really was, it was a step-by-step guide for how you might approach planning, climate adaptation planning in your tribal community or other communities, but it really incorporated cultural protocol into that. You could step from, this is how you assess our, you would start with, you put your net amount down or your Saymon, your tobacco, and you'd ask for that guidance on, and speak out what you were looking to accomplish before you started your project. Reach out to elders, talk to them about what your intentions were, and it could go from that right into technical guidance like develop an environmental assessment for impacts on wetlands. So it really looked at bringing together those knowledge systems and how do we share that across the way to develop plans that are relevant to the tribal community, but also in even educating non-tribal members working for tribes. So this was a great project, and we didn't lead it. We just came in. Glyphwick was leading it, and we just started engaging with them. So. As we talk about indigenous knowledges and climate change planning, I would refer to this as a good resource to learn more. Excellent. The other work that SCI had done over the years was continuing to further expand out how we work and share with others. This map was created as part of our work, original work with the Department of Interior, starting to forget the acronyms, Climate Adaptation Science Center. So this national network of regional centers that connected academic and federal agency resources to support practitioners and managers in the work that they are doing in terms of climate adaptation planning. So our focus was working to support that, but also in identifying the tribal communities in the region we worked in, the Northeast region, and how do we help to support, because there's an inequity of resources, staffing, funding, relationships for those tribes, which we include both federally recognized, state recognized, and unrecognized tribes in that region. How do we create an equity of resources to help those communities plan for their climate adapted futures? So, that was an extension of all that work we were doing at the campus here in our community. This is a picture of the tribal resilience liaisons that came on board that have been a great addition in terms of advocating and getting these resources and information out there. this was back when we were part of Northeast CAST. Since then, SDI is part of Midwest CAST that was just created a couple of years ago. So these slides are a little old. This is back when I was doing the work. So there's a few updates. But, next slide. But I think one of the other bigger opportunities that we've done over the years has been convening the Shifting Seasons Summit. The last one had to be COVID hit and changed everything. So, but it was the third one that was offered, and the previous two really helped to set the research agenda for SDI and the work that we would do with tribal communities to both learn from and to help share resources. So this was really a chance when we would be able to convene people first in the Great Lakes region, Northeast region, and then this was intended to be a gathering at an international scale, but as we said, COVID kind of closed that down a little more. But you can see our partnerships, that's another big part. I think Rebecca mentioned in the panel previously that SDI works collaboratively with a lot of organizations. We think about developing resources and sharing them out. Next slide. So I wanted to share that because it was a connection, community connections, but then how that builds outward, but also how it informs us here so that we can better serve our Menominee community, the people that create Institute and the College of Menominee Nation. We are still beholden to them. I was talking to someone earlier about Indigenous knowledges and research, and how we need to help educate external partners to be better able to work with tribal communities. If that's what they're going to do, then there's things that their responsibilities they're held to. But I said even more so on our end as tribal members working in an organization like this, making connections like this, there's a higher level of response, the community. And so as I was thinking about knowledge systems and how do we think about them, but what kind of protections are in there, recognition and education goes both ways. Us recognizing our knowledge systems, their limitations and the protections that need to be in place, but also really vested in working with us for our benefit as a tribal community. How do we help educate them as to what they can do to help? And not just come in as the, what do you call it, the savior complex or whatever. It's how do you come in and work alongside of us to help. The other part is it helps to teach respect. Knowledge systems help to promote respect when we better understand what we're talking about. And again, on both sides of the collaboration, us in the tribal community, our partners who are coming in to work with us and to learn and share with us. And then it is transformative. I tried to fashion a personal story at the beginning to indicate how much I've learned just from doing this work for my people, having that privilege to work for the Menominee people. And so it's transformative for me in carrying myself forward, supporting my family, my friends, my community, at a larger community. So there's things there that have not only helped me, but others who have been part of this story. And then the relationships that are developed as we work on understanding each other, the different knowledge systems that we carry with ourselves and bring into the work that we do together. And then finally, I think this is, and I've heard some of these elements talked about in the panel previously at the start of the conference, but that relationship, but also as an important way of creating that responsibility. an understanding of our responsibilities, both us as Menominee or other tribal communities, but then also those that come and work with us and work alongside of us, or if we go out and work alongside of others as well. So try to frame it up, just that experience and some of the things I've learned in relation to knowledge systems. I think that's the one more. So this is like the summary of the whole presentation. In Menominee, we're trying to maintain that relationship. It was a time of great change, social, ecological, economic, cultural. You can see this picture of Wisconsin and all that light-colored area, the checkerboard-looking area is a remnant of the great cutover in the 1800s when the settlers were coming in and the economy was booming, I guess. But they were just basically cutting out all the easily, the pine, which are easy to float down the rivers to the mill, and then the hardwoods after that. But during that time, the Menominee kept saying we have to maintain our relationship, and everything they did was maintaining the connection to the land and the forest. And so, if people ever wonder if Menominee's example of sustainable development is real, or if it makes sense, I usually just point to the satellite photos. But so I appreciate the time, and thank you all again for being here, traveling this far from your families and your communities. And then that's all.